Hi, my name's Colin, and in this session I want to show you a quick demo of ephemeral runners in GitHub Enterprise Server. So I have a GitHub Enterprise Server here. I have an application that has a workflow in it, and I'm going to queue this workflow. That is going to send a webhook to an Azure function, which is running over here. The logs are running over here. That in turn, when a workflow is queued, is going to execute this ephemeral workflow, which is running on a centralized repo on the same enterprise server. That's going to spin up an ephemeral runner that can execute this job. So let me get that started. So I'll hit run workflow to queue that job. So it's queued that job. You'll see that the webhook has fired and the Azure function is responding. That then in turn has queued off this workflow here. Now if we click into this workflow is, besides dumping some debug information about the payload, is going to deploy an ephemeral runner into an Azure container instance. All right, so that's going to start executing. It normally takes about 2 minutes odd. I think the authentication to Azure takes the longest part of that. So if we go back to some job here, we'll see that some job is looking for a self-hosted agent to run this job with a particular label, appdev1 sumapp10. So that's a unique label that only exists for this particular job. Now that label, I'll show it to you in the workflow, but that was sent through as part of the webhook to the Azure function, which in turn passed that to this workflow. So when the ephemeral workflow runs, it's going to register the agent with these two tags, self-hosted and appdev1 sumapp10, which is the run ID for this, so it's unique. And we should see that on settings. If I go to actions and go and look at the runners, in a couple of seconds, once it's actually spun up that container instance, we should see that runner. And there we have the runner. It's registered. You can see the appdev1 sumapp10 label applied there. So this should actually now be picked up by the job. And the job is about to start running because there is now a runner that can execute that workflow. So this workflow just does an echo, just showing how this would work, but this is doing whatever it is supposed to do. And once it's completed, it will then send another webhook to complete that run, which in turn will trigger another workflow. I think there we just got the completion trigger there. So that'll trigger another workflow in here to go and clean up the ACI. So I've got a delete dead ACI job in there. And if we go back onto this repo and look at the runners, right, there are no longer any runners because that runner, we register it as ephemeral, and so as soon as the run completes, it deregisters itself. This job is just to clean up the Azure container instance, which is now terminated because the runner has stopped. Let me show you the workflow. Very simple, just make sure we have self-hosted and some kind of unique identifier. I'm using a couple of GitHub context values to make sure that every run gets me a unique label so there's no collisions if we're running this across multiple repositories. And other than that, it's just a usual actions workflow. Hope you enjoyed that demo. The repo for this is on GitHub, right, at this repo, and I have a README that walks through all of the configuration. There's also a dev container for developing the function, as well as a workflow for deploying the function to an Azure subscription, including spinning up the function and deploying the code so that the solution works against an enterprise server. Let me know if you have any questions. Thanks.